Hello, and welcome to another edition of the San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host. I'm coming to you from the East Coast. I'm a longtime journalist. I've produced interviews for CBS News, ABC News, and Good Morning America, and CNN, among others. And we gather for conversations with San Francisco's own author, David Parker. David is the author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco conservative, and Rome 476, and we always enjoy our conversations right here on KSFO Radio. Hey, David, how are you today?
I'm fine, Tom. Nice to hear your voice.
Yes, sir. Great to be with you. Great to be with you. And I'll just get right out of the gate with a fascinating topic. I know it's a topic that you take quite seriously, and as a very successful business person, entrepreneur who's done the numbers for decades. A lot of us, and I'll include some of my journalist colleagues, we talk about big issues and great programs and huge bureaucracy and all of that. And you, like they say, the back of the envelope, you jot down some numbers and say, oh my gosh, we've got a problem here. And what we're talking about today is the hidden cost of progressivism. We've talked about it a little bit in some of our previous shows here on KSFO, but we're going to drill down and go a little bit deeper. And why don't you read the first couple of paragraphs of your latest essay, because I love how you captured this.
It's The Hidden Costs of Progressivism, Part 2. Part 1 was printed in the Epoch Times, and Part 2 probably will be also. Latin nannies are America's smartest people. Under the radar. They pay no income tax, no Social Security tax, plus support each other in old age. By retirement, someone in the family will own a home, probably without a loan. A perfect market response to government interference in the economy. Intuitively, those nannies understand the cost of progressivism. And then I continue with what those costs really are.
Yeah, no, I love that. You get into specifics. It's, as we're all gearing up, I always feel a little anxious as April 15th rolls around. Again, my wife and I are, preparing our joint return and whatnot. But I must admit, I never think about how many of these dollars are paying for, these exorbitant, inflated the cost of this program and that program. And we just never think about it. And then, again, on CNN, we might see, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren saying, we've got to beef up these programs and make the rich pay. There's some flawed logic there. And I love how you give credit to the Latin nannies, like, you really know how it works. But please continue to tell us more about the hidden cost of progressivism.
Right. Well, talking about the rich pay, there are two groups of people who don't pay. The rich don't pay income taxes, and the poor don't pay income taxes. The middle class pay everything. So you never hear the rich complaining, oh, my taxes, my taxes. The rich have all read Robin Hood. We know you're coming for us. We've planned for this long ago. You can't tax the rich. I guess it's another subject, but I like to say in Cupertino, California, is a space station that's owned by Apple Computer. Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks that's their headquarters. It just looks like their headquarters. They're headquartered in Ireland, where the tax rate is 15%, and all their cash, about $200 billion, is maybe less at the moment. Is on Jersey Island, a tax haven in the English Channel.
Wow.
So, and all the big companies are like that. You can't tax the rich. In my Income and Wealth, my first book, I say that the rich have income-producing assets, which they purchase with leverage. Whenever they start showing too much cash flow, you just push up the leverage, you borrow against them a little bit more until the rich always show zero income. Always. That's how it works.
Amazing.
The Social Security and Medicare, for example, which is one of the big things that the nannies aren't chipping into, which is 15% of your income or more, that pays for about $900 billion of our budget. That's a lot. And if half the nation is paying tax, if we're 300 million and 150 million are paying tax, that's about $6,000 a person. And you're paying for social programs that are completely underfunded. It's a complete waste. It's all paid for by borrowing, as we know. Money is not there to pay for it. And so the middle class is paying for it.
Yeah. Well, why don't you get into the specifics? Like I said, I'd like to think, or at least until I read this essay, I thought I was an intelligent person. And, I never, as I'm preparing my own tax return, I never think about the unnecessary thousands of dollars, that I'm paying for, healthcare and, just unnecessarily. But again, you have a great mind for numbers. That's how you, have become so successful there in the, San Francisco real estate sector. Can you walk us through some of these numbers? I mean, I think our listeners would find this quite fascinating.
All right, so there is $6,000 for sure that you're paying that you shouldn't have to pay. The war on poverty Lyndon Johnson said in 1964, it's unconscionable that a nation as wealthy as America has a 15% poverty rate. So that $900 billion, a lot of that is going to the war on poverty. The poverty rate hasn't budged since 1964. On average, it's 15%. There's no improvement. And we doubled the funds. Part of that goes for education. We doubled the funds for education between 1970 and 2000. And we doubled them again, 2000 to now. And test scores drop and drop and drop. They've dropped 25% since 1970, and they have not come back. And the Department of Education says that only 36% of the nation is proficient in reading and math. The rest have learned nothing.
They're proficient, right?
Proficient. The Navy dropped this entrance exam level to 4th grade. That's the level that high school seniors graduate today in America.
Wow. So some of my progressive friends, I mean, I do have a lot of liberal friends, and I guess some of them are probably progressives. I don't know if I know anyone who actually voted for Bernie Sanders, but we, like to tell themselves that, it's a matter of compassion. I forget how Lyndon Johnson phrased it. It's unconscionable that people are living in poverty in, the greatest nation on the planet. And of course it is the greatest nation, but these programs that have us shelling out, billions of dollars over the years, trillions perhaps, we think it's compassion, but they haven't helped these people, right?
Correct. Because money cannot solve problems. Is it time for a commercial break?
Perfect. Yeah, hold that thought, David. Again, this is a San Francisco Conservative right here on KSFO Radio. Tom Martin and my co-host, author David Parker, and we will continue in just a moment.
Meet David Parker, a lifelong native of San Francisco, a true Renaissance man, educator, investor, and entrepreneur, jazz musician. David Parker is a San Francisco conservative. That's the title of his second book and this show, one that reminds us all just how precious our democracy really is. He's an optimist, and some of his views may surprise you. Parker's writing reminds us all that the study of history provides important perspective on current challenges. You can learn more about David Parker's writing by visiting davidparkeressays.com. On the website, you can also download a free chapter from Parker's book, A San Francisco Conservative. The impact of Parker's writing extends far beyond the city by the bay. Be sure to visit davidparkeressays.com to learn more and download a free chapter from his book. That's davidparkeressays.com.
Hello and welcome back to A San Francisco Conservative right here on KSFO Radio. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host, along with author David Parker right there in San Francisco. And David is the author of Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476, books that really take a historical perspective to a lot of our current challenges. There's a lot of wisdom to be found in these books, I can tell you firsthand. And as many readers of the Epoch Times, Bay Area edition, and National edition as well know, there's a lot of wisdom in David's essays that appear there frequently. And we've been talking about one of his essays, The Hidden Cost of Progressivism, Part 2. We talked a little bit about Part 1 recently, and you can find Part 1 in the Epoch Times if you go to, do a little Google search there. But David, we were talking about, again, I was saying, as I'm preparing my income tax return for April 15th, it never occurs to me that I'm paying thousands and thousands of dollars that are unnecessary. I mean, I have no doubt there's a lot of government waste and inefficiency, but you really drill down to very specific programs. Can you walk us through another one of those programs just so we can become aware?
Not necessarily government programs, which are a waste. We could backtrack 1 second and talk about the national debt, since national debt is government programs.
Sure.
Social Security and Medicare, the funds are not coming from the taxpayers. There's not enough to pay for it. They're way, way over the top. It's paid for by borrowing. And there's a risk there. The United States is not going to fall, but Rome was a great civilization for about 600 years. That's a long time, and at a higher level of civilization than we were, especially in the first century Rome, much higher. Average conversation between citizens was a much higher level, and their understanding of law was at equal to our understanding of law. They had a lot of tax revenue, but they were borrowing so much for government programs that by 476, Rome collapsed, and that's when the Huns came in, and the Visigoths and the Vandals, and they with sledgehammers, not with swords, and pulverized Rome to dust. No different if somebody came in today and pulverized Washington, D.C. to dust, the White House, the Senate, the Lincoln Memorial, everything.
That's why on the cover of your book, on the cover of your book, Rome 476, it's just one wall of the famous Roman Colosseum.
The Colosseum is so big, they got tired. They couldn't knock the whole thing down. They left one wall. It looked like the windows are smashed out of it. One would say they had a lot of tax revenue, and the military was the greatest military of Europe. The military just sat there and watched the Huns. They didn't lift a finger because they hadn't been paid. Because all tax revenue went to service interest on the debt. There was not a penny for any government program. And we're at that state. We're getting close to it.
Are you saying we need to worry about the national debt?
No, because we'll solve the problem. We'll do like what Greece did. I was in Greece in 2010 during the Euro crisis. They couldn't pay their debts, period. They were out of money. And they decided to just cut Social Security. I'm in the kitchen with school teachers. The envelopes came in the mail, they opened them up, and they all laughed. Their Social Security payment was cut in half. Problem solved. The reason they laughed is we had no right to have that much Social Security. Politicians were running on office for the last 20 years. Vote for me and I'll raise your pension. I'll raise government services. I'll raise and I'll raise and I'll raise for 20 years. And we said, okay, it's cash in our hand, fine.
They knew it was too good to last.
It was too good to last. And we're in the same position. We're paying way too much for Medicare, way too much for Social Security.
Yeah.
The funds aren't there. The middle class needs to be taxed between 50 and 70% of their income. Just drive them back to the Middle Ages. Then we can support these things.
Do you think we'll see a courageous politician stand up and saying, okay, folks, it's about time someone told you reality. We must cut Social Security and Medicare. Was it about a year ago that, Joe Biden was in his State of the Union address, and he said, okay, if you say you're not going to cut, who here raise your hand if you're going to cut Medicare and Social Security, and no one raised their hand.
Right.
But maybe it's time, do you think we'll see a courageous politician say it's time that we did this?
We need a catastrophe for someone to step forward and say, we better do something. That live within our means is good enough. We can accept a lot of sloppiness if we're living within our means. If we add a program, we'll cut another program someplace else. Just live within your means. And that politician hasn't come forward. I was hoping Donald Trump would do that, and he hasn't. And maybe he will in his second term coming up.
Okay.
But he hasn't done it yet. But that's what a politician needs. That's what this nation needs: someone to come forward and say, we better start doing things right. You can't just tell your kids if you want to get a new mitt for the baseball team, just go to the corner store and give them an IOU.
Yeah.
You can't teach your kids that's how it works.
Yeah. Interesting. And speaking of America's children, I've heard I guess it's kind of a cliche, over the years, but, you can't solve problems by throwing money at them. But it sounds like the federal government has put more money and more money and more money into American education over the years. You were a public school teacher there in San Francisco for 40 years and a volunteer for 10 more years beyond that. What about this whole idea of, we just have about a minute, but throwing more money into the education system?
I taught at a school in San Francisco that was out in the boondocks and out near the Giants baseball stadium. And they wanted to do something for a poor neighborhood. And they built a very nice school with yards on different levels. And the students, older kids weren't mixing with the younger kids. And they had bathrooms for every kindergarten and first grade class in their room. They had a librarian full-time there, and they had a PE teacher full-time, and they had an auditorium with professional lighting, and they had all kinds of support personnel, resource people. There's nothing left to spend.
I'll tell you what, David, you know what? Let's give them a cliffhanger, and I want to hear the end of this story, but let's take a break for just a moment here on KSFO Radio. Tom Martin and David Parker, and we will continue with, I want to hear what happened with that school in just a minute.
In the heart of the vibrant city by the bay, meet a voice that's challenging the status quo. David Parker, author of A San Francisco Conservative and Rome 476. David Parker, a true San Franciscan with a conservative vision for the future, is a voice that resonates with our nation's founding fathers. Freedom from government, not with government. For 40 years, he taught in San Francisco's inner city schools, acquired a large real estate portfolio, and worked as a professional musician. The Dave Parker Sextet performs every week. It's time for a fresh perspective, one that values fiscal responsibility, individual responsibility. David Parker is not only an academic, his thumb is on the pulse of the economy. He brings real solutions to all the problems affecting our nation. Learn more at davidparkeressays.com and get a free chapter to any of his books, A San Francisco Conservative, Rome 476, and Income and Wealth. That's davidparkeressays.com.
Hello and welcome back to A San Francisco Conservative here on KSFO Radio. Again, I'm Tom Martin. My co-host is author David Parker right there in San Francisco. And we did something a little novel there. Did you catch it? We have a cliffhanger. David was telling us about a fabulous school that the state of California had plowed many, many dollars into. It was lavish. It was opulent. Bathrooms for the kindergartners. I love it. So what happened to this fabulous school, David?
They thought if they would spend money and make a really beautiful surrounding, and it was an elementary school, and I was teaching in it at the time. I was teaching the 4th, 5th, and 6th. I was teaching music. On top of that, 3/4 of the faculty were male, not female. They had wanted to help these kids, these lower social, economically deprived kids, make it. Everybody had that idealistic thing, myself included. And that school was the bottom of the San Francisco. And after the huge input of money, there was nothing left to spend except to put gold door handles. That was the only thing that was missing.
Oh my God.
It had everything. And for the whole 20 years that I was there, that school remained at the lowest performing school in San Francisco.
Wow. Amazing.
You cannot solve problems with money. And, you know, I'm a professional jazz musician. My band plays every week in San Francisco. And one of my players was from Brooklyn, a trumpet player, and he used to play at the Blue Note. He was part of the house band. I had great musicians.
Wow.
He lived in Brooklyn, and he told me he was in a barber shop there. And one of the brothers stood up and says, you know, government is not spending enough money on the poor people, on us. And another person in that barbershop stood up and said, if you can solve problems by spending money, you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
That put that whole barbershop into silence. And when he told me that, I almost died on the shop. There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. We all know now you can't solve problems with money. If the poor know you can't solve problems, the rich know the middle class better hurry up and catch up and stop. You don't need to spend money. The students need to study, and maybe lengthen the school day might be a better use of the funds. And go to school on Saturday if you want to do something real.
Yeah. No, one of the points you mentioned in your essay, "The Hidden Cost of Progressivism," Part 2, that you shared with me, is in this. I don't know if it's been published or will be published in the near future. There in the Epoch Times, where
probably in a week or two. Yeah,
where many of your essays are featured. And you mentioned about again, it's like I spoke a moment ago about the good intentions of some of my progressive friends. Like, Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty has said the needle did not move, hasn't moved for decades. So it's, good intentions is not going to solve the problem or really
never moved.
Amazing. So when you were writing in this essay about schools, and people said a lot of people are calling for diversity, which is great. I like diversity. I want my children to experience that. But you said that vocabulary is something to think about, right?
Well, we have almost everybody graduates high school today. And there's only one way the schools have been able to produce what they call equal outcome, educational justice, inclusivity, is by lowering the standards. Because students coming from low social background, not necessarily economic background. You can be poor and do very well in school if your parents make you read and talk to you. But if you come from a low social background, you might not. And teachers know it, and they never say it. Teachers union knows it. They would never say it. That kids from a low social background are entering kindergarten with a 2,500 to 4,500 word deficit, increasing through the 12th grade. So if they're all graduating, then you know that the standards have been dropped. Otherwise, they would just flunk out.
Yeah.
2 proofs. I mentioned earlier that the Navy finally dropped its reading level to 4th grade because they couldn't get anybody to join the Navy. They couldn't read the exam. That's the level high school students are graduating. Department of Education says 36% of the nation is proficient. And proficient, that's D+. Or that's not really proficient. And the other is, there's been articles, San Jose Mercury News many times has says that the Silicon Valley, where I'm living, 71% of the workforce is foreign born. They cannot find Americans who have education in statistics and science and math and all that STEM. They have to import them.
Yeah. So people who are all fired up about immigration right now, this is it sounds like inextricably linked, if that's the word, with the quality of education of native-born Americans, right?
Right. We didn't go to the moon in the 1960s based on American scientists. We grabbed all those German Nazis, and Russia's grabbed the other half. That's how they all went to the moon.
Interesting. Yeah. No, good point. Good point. And in terms of, I can't resist, this might be kind of going off on a tangent here, but when you talk about vocabulary and so on, and proficiency with language, I love your books because they're history lessons. And you mentioned great thinkers going back thousands of years, great thinkers like Aristotle. And when I was a philosophy major in college many years ago, but when you read Aristotle, the language is so beautiful, it's hard to imagine, you put that side by side with the typical language we come across currently. What are your thoughts about that?
My thought is the level of civilization in 5th century Athens, as well as 1st century Rome, was much higher than today. People were talking about what Aristotle was saying, what Plato was saying. They were going to the theater, they're watching plays by Aeschylus. People today couldn't read it. But if you do read it, if I didn't tell you, if I read it out loud, who wrote it, you would think it's an American or somebody today. They were us. We are them. The vision of our founding fathers was the funeral oration of Pericles.
Wow.
From the Peloponnesian War. That's their vision of a free, open society. The enemy is walking within us. We don't care. They're not going to overtake our free people.
Yeah, amazing. Well, that's a beautiful and inspiring note to end on. I hope our listeners here on KSFO Radio maybe drop by the library, or you can get Aristotle on Amazon, I think. So, but another place I want to send you, of course, is to David's website. Please visit David's website. That's davidparkeressays.com. That's davidparkeressays.com. You can read about his 3 books, Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476, which you explained that story in our conversation here. And send us a note. We want to hear from you. We want to include your thoughts in this broadcast. On David's website, you can also download a sample chapter of Rome 476. So thanks for being with us, David, and look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thank you, Tom.
Meet David Parker, a lifelong native of San Francisco, a true Renaissance man, educator, investor, and entrepreneur, jazz musician. David Parker is a San Francisco conservative. That's the title of his 2nd book and this show, one that reminds us all just how precious our democracy really is. He's an optimist, and some of his views may surprise you. Parker's writing reminds us all that the study of history provides important perspective on current challenges. You can learn more about David Parker's writing by visiting davidparkeressays.com. On the website, you can also download a free chapter from Parker's book, A San Francisco Conservative. The impact of Parker's writing extends far beyond the city by the bay. Be sure to visit davidparkeressays.com to learn more and download a free chapter from his book. That's davidparkeressays.com.